Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Strife's Sanctum podcast. My name is Citizen Strife, and this week I talk again about anime for the week and the season. And it's felt like forever. Really hasn't been, but I was able to get through so much recently that it just feels like a lot of things moved pretty quickly, and good shows kept getting good. Some of them stumbled slightly, and I even dropped one, but not to a crazy extent. But I kept with the ones that I was going to keep with. Fair warning, there are spoilers in this setup. So it is spoiler warning for that. It's also dub version, so they may or may not be up to date for the week that I'm uploading them. They could be a week later or 2 weeks later, so you may know more about the show than I do. So if I'm speculating about something, or if the vibe of the show is different and it changes, well, that changes. I'm really kind of talking in the moment about them. But that's how it's been for the last, year or so since I started doing these. Anyway, let's get to the talking points. And we will start with a show that I was worried about getting to for so long, but it's going to be Frieren. And it's Frieren Season 2. So, obviously, Frieren is one of my favorite shows. I would say Spy Family is probably going to be my favorite show, but you're splitting hairs when you're talking about Apothecary, Frieren, Spy Family, Bebop, stuff like that. But Frieren is definitely up there, so I was very curious how the second season would go. And this is post-Frieren crying. And I'd heard about the meme, and I haven't stopped watching footage of the crying scene in Japanese and in English since it happened. And I was honestly very curious about the context of it all. And I was pleasantly surprised, because Frieren does great at setting up dumb jokes while still maintaining the show's seriousness. They went through an area and got a grimoire for beating a stupid, a stupid demon that stole a stupid sword, and they got it back because of something Himmel said. He said, well, it's an inconvenience now, but it will pay off in the long run. So Frieren kept to her word, and she refound the sword again. The fighting and whatnot, the visual style of the fight scenes are still up to par with first season, and they're really freaking good. So the second episode goes on without a hitch. The third episode is cut into two parts. The first part is finding a foot bath, mislabeled a hot spring, a legendary hot spring, but going up a stupid mountain and fighting a stupid Hydra dragon thing, but doing it, and then finding out that, again, it's the stupid moments, the silly things that you do that make you remember things. And that's really true and very poignant, especially a show, again, that is comedic in a dry way, where it's not trying to be very slapstick, where a lot of its humor comes from just the characters reacting to simple, stupid things. Like Frieren, falling out of bed, or falling for a mimic, or just stupid sight gags like that, or things they say. And Aizen going on and saying, I loved the view and I wouldn't change it for anything. I wouldn't have changed my journey for anything. So seeing Stark want to do that was really nice. And then we get to the crying scene. Holy shit. Fern is just pouty because Frieren's doing her own thing in the hot springs, and she's trying to nudge Stark and go, well, I'm not busy. So he thinks it's a smart idea to go, well, let's just go on a date then. She doesn't know how to handle it. I'm guessing she didn't expect him. And I don't think he expected her to just fucking clam up. But she's in her room, and Stark is trying to talk to Frieren about, what do I do? And he calls her a grandma. And then Frieren just goes, well, my tantrums are such and such and such. And she goes and she basically cries for like 30 to 45 seconds. And what's funny is that both versions work for different ways. The sub version, which I saw first, that's the meme that started. Mostly because I'm not used to her voice. I'm usually used to the dub voice actors, Mallory Rodak. And I think the sub version, the talking stuff, you hear Frieren and you're like, she sounds a little younger than she's supposed to. But the crying scene works better because her voice is higher pitched and she just sounds so freaking whiny and so into it. And then you hear Mallory's version and it's a lot more subdued crying and lower pitched and just the mope whining, and it's still good. But I think what sets that apart more is the dialogue, at least in the English version, I feel is a little more smooth than just, she's been at it for 3 days and 3 nights. Like, just a little more emphasis on the despair involved and the stupidity of it all. And it's just hilarious. So you get past that, and Frieren goes, and she's trying to give Fern advice about going on a date. And Frieren, in her own way, doesn't really know how dating works, despite the fact that I think Himmel totally would want to date Frieren if he could, and I think he did in a way. But whatever. It's weird because there's always that subtext of Himmel and Frieren sort of becoming a couple, but never really doing that, because how would that work? But finding out that Fern and Stark are going out on a date, and she's trying to do her best to explain, well, I've been on dates, I can help, in the stupid way that she does. And it's beautiful because the 3 main characters do their own comedy in their own ways. And again, it's subdued comedy, and it doesn't work if it's over the top. So having these moments of character flourish in spite of, we're on this journey, we're doing the whatever. And then you remember, and I talked about this all the way back in Aggro Proxy, some of the best episodes are the ones where you're not really doing the saving world nonsense. It's the character building moments of these 2 people going out on a date, or these people interacting with each other and doing stupid shit that in the end don't matter, but make them more human, or elf in this case. So you want those moments of levity, of breaking the monotony, because if you don't, then it just becomes a slog sometimes, and Frieren has never felt like a slog. Next up, I'm going to skip around To Your Eternity because stuff hasn't really changed. I think they're going to do, if they miss an episode, they usually dump a couple to make up for it a week later, so that's what it is. So Trigun Stargaze is next. And I talked about Millie, and that's great. And they do just enough. They justify her existence, and they keep her and Meryl together, but they don't, overdo it. It's almost like she's always been there, and it's, how it should be. And now Wolfwood is in the party again. It's, how it should be. The last couple of episodes have been about Vash kind of recovering from Lost July, and they go about it in a different way. I don't think they even had Lena like they did in the original. Instead, they have Hopart the Gauntlet. And I forget if Lena was the character he knew, the girl that got blown away or whatnot, but I'm guessing that's where the reference would come in. But Hopart the Gauntlet kind of playing the subdued protagonist, as opposed to I'm just a random villain, is, again, part of what I'm liking about this show is that they're digging very deep into the mentalities of the characters and the villains. I do like it when they get, not every time. Sometimes you need a Luca Blight. Sometimes you need a Kefka. You need those. But there are times when you kind of want to understand why a person is moving in such a direction that they're willing to kill somebody. And in this instance, you're basically told, whether it's Leonoff the puppet master or whatnot, all of the shit that happened in Lost July basically turned Knives into nothingness. and he's being revived. So we're going to take our vengeance on Vash. And, Hopart wasn't really a part of it directly. He wasn't a gung-ho gun in one instance, but he's setting the world in motion in the sense that he found Vash after Lost July because he knew that he caused it and wanted to get rid of Vash, but didn't. And it's weird because he had every right to, and he could have, but he was conflicted and said, no, this person is an invalid. I don't think it's fair. And then you find Jessica showing up, and Jessica's played differently in this. She was just a normal, ditzy, Americanized young teenager girl. Now she's played as kind of a black, preteen, so I don't know how that's going to work. But again, it's really just, she's in love with Vash, obviously, but, it's a little more tame and played simply, and it's, not as overt and goofy as it was, I think, and that's to its benefit. Another side point, the dub actress for Jessica in this version is played by the person who did Isaka and With You or Love Will Make It Through, or whatever they call it, the one with the Beast Folk guy from the last season. So I was like, it drove me nuts when I first heard her. I'm like, I just heard her voice every single freaking episode for months, and I didn't know who it was. And I'm like, oh, that answered that. But Jessica shows up, and they're talking about these plant things, these seeds, these spaceships coming down to take people from the planet. I'm guessing they're just gonna fucking blow everything up. That'd be my guess. But they need, Legato and his group of gung-ho guns are stealing a bunch of stuff, and they're stealing the plants to regenerate knives, so the gung-ho guns are just going around and doing things. But you have Leonoff, the puppet master, they kind of redo his version of the events, but they do it in a little more flair this time, because again, there's a lot more visual panache 25 years later. It just is. I don't know if I really needed to know that he was a former crewmate. That was, it's fine. I don't care. But, I think they're just trying to justify the Vash won't kill anybody. And then you have Wolfwood constantly going, eventually that's going to come bite you in the ass, Needle Nog, and shit like that. So they do that. And they get to Mid-Valley the Horn Freak and what he can do, which is use his sound waves to blow up a person's fucking head from across the way. That's kind of iffy and disturbing and weird. They get Legato, utilizing his talent, I think, where he was like a psychic, and they played it, especially in the original, because they didn't have the visual craziness they do now. They played it a lot more subdued, where I just kind of shaking and I do stupid stuff and now I'm dead, shit like that. This is more, oh god, people are flying around, they're doing this crap. He's a lot more chaotic, and I don't know, he doesn't come across as menacing because of that, because he's played a lot more theatrical. In the original, they used his words to define him, and he didn't really do anything. He didn't have to. But then he had an episode to himself where all he did was fuck with Vash until he had no choice but to die. This one, I don't think there is that same... I don't know. It depends on where they go, because you still know that Knives is the main villain, so it's like, where does Legato fit? Where is Legato's endgame gonna show up? And then how much stuff is he gonna do? But they counteract that by making Mid-Valley the Horn Freak kind of a nice dude. In a way, he's the unsure of himself villain of the piece, and he's just like, well, I know I'm a villain, but I have standards, and even he's just kind of like, well, this is fucking wrong. So I don't think trying to go to the winning side, the protagonist side, is going to work out for him so well. So I just wonder where he's going to end up. And you still have a few more of the gung-ho guns that they didn't really introduce yet. So I want to see the rest of them. and see where they go and be like, okay, you introduced a couple in the first season. You're now starting to filter them all in here and redo them, and it's a cool visual, and you're allowed to do a lot more with the style, and it's maintaining it's a darker approach. And again, the comedy's a little more subdued and less in your face, so it does feel more like the second half of the original Trigun than, that's its default mode, which makes it, I don't know if it makes it as good, but I think it still stands up, which is fine. But that's Trigun Stargaze. Let's get to, I was going to say Stampede and then Stargaze. Okay, Hell's Paradise Season 2. This one is another one of those, like, I want to talk about it, but I don't know what's going on half the time, so they needed an episode like this week to slow shit down, because a lot of the first couple of episodes was just a lot of fight scenes. And even though I'm re-engaging with who the characters are and what they're fighting and how they're fighting them, it took a bit of explanation, and they finally did that in one of the weirdest ways possible. The Lord Tensen turned into a female form and basically just essentially had sex with the character that they could have just murdered if they'd wanted to, but they didn't because they want them as a guinea pig. So they're trying to explain the idea of Tao and Ton as energies that they can manipulate and use and drain from people, and how it's also the life force to find ways to kill them and kill their regeneration and whatnot. So I found it weird that you're basically using a sexual position or a sutra as like a healing mechanism, because Gabimaru was going nuts, and then the main Asaman lady is just like, no, we're going to heal you with this suggestive pose, I guess. And no, I don't know if they had sex, but it was close. But it's like, that's interesting. That's an interesting approach. And again, sexuality is can be construed as a healing and a manifestation of power and whatnot. But there is the connotation of it too. It's like, it's an interesting approach, if nothing else. So I found that strange. I also found it strange that, okay, you had this imposing male version of the Tensen, and you had this equally imposing but alluring version in the female, and it's like, this is where this is going. And now they've introduced a set of secondary samurai and Asaemon to the proceedings, and they're killing things. So I don't know where they're going to, everything's going to go. All I know is that the show is going to be a lot of fighting, and sometimes it's going to be some interesting dialogue, but doing it in a different way than other shows, so it's not just a shonen just to be a shonen, but it is sometimes hard to follow. But I'm getting better at re-engaging with it, because again, it's been a few years, so that's kind of the only drawback. Let's see. Sentenced to be a Hero, talking about shonen. We have you have the characters just going to this fortress and basically being left to die. You are going to defend it while we blow the Demon Lord sky high. But Xylo is like, no, I'm not going to do that because I'm not stupid and I know your situation. So I'm going to blow it up in your face. And I'm going to... He still has to begrudgingly use Teorita's powers to manifest the victory somehow. But again, much like the first few episodes, it's been a lot of killing, and a lot more killing. The visuals and the fight scenes are great in that gritty, disturbing, disgusting way. But it's a lot of demon blood, and that's great. A lot of just, you're a fucking bitch. Let me do my stuff. Just get going. Let me do my thing. Xylo is great in that sense. And I've said, and I'm going to continue saying it, it is very Shield Hero-esque. But in a way that so far hasn't been distracting, because they know that, like, I would say kind of like Black Lagoon-esque in the sense like nobody's nice and nobody's trying to be nice. So it's like, all right, well, everybody's bad. So it's like, deal with it. So the qualms of it don't even apply at some point. Again, Black Lagoon, totally different story. I'm just kind of referencing the very Shield Hero-esque. And you do have Xylo being very Naofumi-esque, but it's like, how far down the just very basic isekai junk are you gonna get? Or are you gonna stay very gritty and disturbing and, raunchy and shit? And I'm like, please stay raunchy. Please stay a little, because then it could still work. Because it's not gonna be for everybody. But I think the more you do the dirty, dingy stuff and the less goofy comedy you do, the better the show's gonna be. Because it's still all about stabbing things. Speaking of stabbing things, there was a lot of it in Shiboyugi the last couple of episodes. There was the new setup is the 30th game for Yuki. She's in this bathhouse and she wakes up and people are dying because there's only 30 keys and there's like 50 people, so people have to die. But Mishiro is the leader of the secondary party at the doorway. So Yuki tries to develop a plan. It does not go well. And then people start dying left and right. And I just finished the episode where Yuki does end up escaping. I will say, what frustrates me about the show sometimes is when it likes to jump cut things and stay subdued rather than sticking to, oh, hey, we're doing this crazy fight scene. Let's just keep to its conclusion. No, they go to a different part of the chronology and they go, well, I'm going to talk about this, but this shit and this side, and then I'm going to show what really happened in the fight later. I'm like, okay, but I would have liked it if you just stayed chronological and just kind of went through it and stayed with it. It was like, who won where, why, who survived what? Not that it's the biggest detriment, but I think even this show, which benefits from being a very slow and sometimes plodding pace, when you find a moment where, like, the main villainous lady is like, I want you dead, let me have you dead, but then she's questioning, no, you're not who I thought you were, but I'm still going to kill you anyway. Stick with it. Let the performances fight on, and then make it the entire scene. Don't jump around to the other girl that you're building up in the story. Like, you don't have to. You can get to that minute later once we know. Because I think it's you're trying to do a tell, don't show, and then you show it later anyways, rather than, okay, just stick with the thing you're gonna show. This is not a mystery show. You're not trying to tell a mystery back and forth and, jump around and jump. This is a death game show. Like, show the effects on the characters, sure, but when you have a scene that is very climactic and you're talking about the characters and they're screaming at each other, you should stick with the scene from the beginning to the end. But that's just a personal quibble. I still think it's one of the better shows, and it's probably gonna be, again, neck and neck with Sentenced to Be a Hero and In the Clear Moonlit Dusk. So there was that. You and I are polar opposites. Culture Festival episodes. Oh boy. Just those. I mean, it's a Culture Festival. Okay, cool. Normal Culture Festival setup. You do those episodes all the time. You do a beach, you do a beach, or you do a swimming episode, or you do a culture festival. That's how these slice of life school shows should work. So they do that. What they did do, at the very least, was introduce Suzuki's first relationship, and they make it like kind of like she's unsure of herself, and it was a terrible idea. So does it count as a relationship? But then it is like, it does count as a relationship because there were feelings involved, whether that was consistent or not. It's still technically, whatever. Now, first real girlfriend and first real boyfriend, whatever, stuff like that. It's fine because, this show's trying to do romance in its own quirky way, and you get to see sides of Suzuki and Tani that you're not used to, and they're doing a subplot with this very stupid, shy, mousy girl who doesn't know. I mean, I hate those kinds of characters, but at least she's a side character. So another dopey boy is like into her too, but the relationship doesn't really go anywhere. But you gotta kind of do it, because you can't just have it about Suzuki and Tani for 12 or 13 episodes. At least they're building up other characters as potential relationship fodder to have other side stories. So I'm happy about that. Kaya-chan isn't scary. I like Kaya, and she likes to hit things and blow up ghosts and do things. So she blew up a ghost in an old folks' home while trying to meet with a potential relative who scared the shit out of her because she didn't know that Kaya had all this crazy power. But he's also potentially possessed, but we don't know if she's possessed, but she feels possessed, but she's also herself and not herself. And then you find out that she has an aunt that is part of the family that's trying to stay out of it. But, they're trying to build the suspense about what Kaya is going to end up doing. Because you have to remember, she's a 4 to 5 year old girl. She has her own motivations and things, but can't act on them responsibly, or at least with every ounce of her being, because she's 5 years old. So how does the instructor Miss Chie handle her? How does her mother deal with this? Because her mother is a normal person, except she's housing like the devil spawn of Satan or something. So it's like, okay, that's a problem. So how does everybody else fit into this? So it's still one of those things where when it wants to be shocking and kind of disturbing, it wants to do it and is willing to do some crazy shit. But they're building up the main characters the way they should. Now, is it the best? No. But it does it in a way that I think is suitable and fun, because you do have side stories and you're not like always doing the same thing every episode. You're doing like 2 or 3 mini episodes have a main plot. And learning about Kaya's situation is part of the fun. And then, let's see, next up, we're getting to the end here, is... Sorry, I'm having to bust through a couple of things. It should be... yes, 2 more shows. Or, no, 3. Looks like. Yeah, 3 more. Alright, Love Through a Prism, another romance show. And Lily and Kit are slowly kind of getting together. And I bum rushed like 6 episodes in the last couple of weeks. So I'm about halfway through the show already. And things have taken a turn. They go to Kit's family and learn he's stupidly wealthy and stupidly important. And I get where the show is coming from on both ends of the character spectrum, because I get that Kit doesn't want to be defined by his status and do what he wants to do. But at the same time, he is a silver-spooned, basically impossibly good and wealthy person that has everything basically bought and sold, yet has the talent to also back it up. So he's, a rich kid, namby-pamby, nepo baby that has everything, and it still bitches about it because he doesn't want to be tied down to it. Like, there's something admirable about that, but at the same time, like, it's also not admirable because, like, you have way more privilege than you should, and you're denying it. I get that, and you don't want to be defined by your lineage or what somebody is telling you to do. I respect that. But also, when you have every single advantage afforded to you, you have to skirt a line of saying, all right, I don't want to be defined by this, but I don't want to just throw away basically a golden ticket in my life. So they've spent the last few episodes talking through, okay, well, my brother runs everything because my dad is dealing with an illness of some sort, or he's going to, probably shutter the family business off to us eventually because he's getting older. Makes sense. So, but he's fawning off on Lily, this important dress. So Christine Astor, this, fiance, they spend the next few episodes talking about her and her setup and like the interesting dynamic of her and Lily. Like, first he's trying to kind of use her as a fodder of saying, look at me, I'm super important and you're just a scrub lady. But then you realize that Lily's honestly trying to make an effort to be her friends, and it kind of turns around, and it's really nice, and there's a dynamic. But then you have, again, the like, Kit likes Lily, sort of doesn't. Lily sort of likes him, but she doesn't, sort of thing. And it's fun, and I like them. But the classism dynamic it does feel forced, and at the same time is weird, because it's like, how is he likable in any way? Because the good parts about him, if he wasn't a spoiled rich kid, probably would work better. Because what I'm noticing is that people who aren't as privileged get pissed off because he's always first. And like, Lily takes up for that person instead, as opposed to Kit, so she's not blind to it either. So I did like that the show was at least, you don't understand our issues, and yet you're trying to pawn off your own bullshit. Like, again, I respect that a person wants to be a free spirit and not be tied down by weight and expectation and all that. But at the same time, if you have more money than God, you would probably be well-to-do to make an effort to learn why you have more money than God, rather than just sit on your ass and blow it out your ears and, try to deny that you were born into a super rich fucking family and have everything. So he's not likable in that sense. So he's like, 30% of him is likable, and then the rest of him is just a fucking asshole. That does make for good discussion and things, but I don't know if it makes for great chemistry. If it weren't for Lily being such a pure-hearted soul of this crazy fish out of water girl, I don't know if this cast would work as well as it does. Because there's, unlike another show that I want to talk about, where it does kind of work. Because it's a dichotomy. It's done in a similar way, but also isn't. Where it's in the clear moonlit dusk, where it's less contentious, where Kohaku is from a rich family, and he revels in it, but only to a point. He's defined by it to a point, but his sort of antagonistic views aren't from a I don't care or whatever. No, he's actually like pursuing the relationship and actually taking the aggressive approach. But it comes into contrast with Yoi, who is not really feeling it and is kind of like also feeling it at the same time. It's like they clearly like each other, and you know that when they're around each other, they like their camaraderie. They aren't like butting heads about everything about them. They're slowly getting to each other, but they're also like, you're kind of overbearing, because Kohaku's thing is he's pursuing it way too hard. But by doing so, he's getting under Yoi's skin, but he's not doing it in a malicious way. It's kind of goofy, but also in a goofy way that at least balances out compared to Kit, who just feels like, fuck the world, I just want to do art. Well, if you want to fuck the world and do art, then leave everybody else out of it. At least with Kohaku, he's like, yeah, I have a rich family. It doesn't define me, but at least I still have some agency in my life. I think it's because he doesn't shudder everybody away. Like, he has his moments of, people are bullying you, I'm going to stand up for you. Or, I'm being an asshole, and I didn't want to be an asshole. Like, he's able to apologize for his weaknesses. So there's at least something there in him, inherent in him, that is more likable, despite some weirdness with his tone where he's like, I just like the way you look, Which is weird, because the show actually references it several times. Or is like, you're coming off a bit stalkerish. It's weird. Like, you only like me because of how I look? Well, no, but yes. But they play it for laughs, too. as opposed to Love Through a Prism, which again I think has too many things on its plate that it's trying to get across, and I know that in the end it will probably work itself out, but it also is a bit like, if you were more likable, I'd be more understanding of your plight. So there's a difference between these characters where one I find a little more understandable, despite I still like the show, but not as much as that one. Anyway, last show I want to talk about is An Adventurer's Grind at the Age of 29, and this one took a turn for the weird and goofy, and this is kind of in that, like, I still will watch it and I enjoy it, but I know I enjoy it in the junk food role because several other shows fell off because of it. So it's now in that, I know this is kind of chintzy and sloppy dud. I don't care. I kind of still like it. Rirui is a friend to two people and is bad at her job of being an adventurer, but, she wants to be around Hajime, which is fine. And Hajime is starting to grow a harem out of nowhere, despite having... I mean, he's likable, but, like, in a weird, like, some of the things he does and says is weird and stupid, and, like, he ruins the chances he has with people. So it's like, he likes this person, he likes that person. Rirui, despite being 4 or 5 or 6, but can turn into a 16-year-old girl, somehow has feelings for him. And don't ask me. She turns into a teenage woman overnight, at nightfall. I don't understand how that system works. But again, it's played more for comedy and laughs than anything. I don't think it's anything serious, and I don't think he finds it serious. What I did find funny was, there's this Medusa lady who can't see anybody, but the power of Rirui can, for a minute, let her see things and do things. And it was all a dream. It is a dream sequence and whatever. But then Veronica, the other succubus lady, is like, I'm a childhood friend. I want to date you so I can dump you because you're dumb. I'm like, wait, how does that fucking work? But again, you don't think too much of it because it's stupid. And, like, it's meant to be dumb. But some of the dialogue still works. I like it because the character dynamics, for as sloppy as it is and as junky as it is, still does have some moments despite the derb, and I don't think it's trying to be amazing, life-changing, loving stuff, and sometimes you need that. But at least it has some heart to it in spite of its stupidness. Like taking care of a sparrow bird and calling it a dragon because you want it to be a dragon, though it's totally not a dragon. Dumb shit like that. So it's hitting in that junk food spot well enough that I think it's going to stick. What didn't stick was Roll Over and Die. I know that I was going to give it another episode or two, and I ended up doing it, like, the first episode had potential, but there was one thing that really sucked about Roll Over and Die, and it was a fight scene. The dialogue in the fight scene was bad. There was these weird slowdowns, and they were like, it wasn't like the character was talking anymore. She was more like talking through her attack, and I was like, no, you're doing the shonen shit again. No! And it's like, this person's level has this, and if you attack it this way, you're going to do damage. I'm like, no! Don't do that! Be a character! Don't be stupid! So it was like all the good stuff in the first episode, which is still kind of bleh, was at least, enjoyable. And then they just do a fight scene and they're like, we'll be talking through this battle. Like, we're actually telling you how we're going to do every single fight. It's like you're choreographing a fight and you're talking through the choreography while you're doing the fight scene. And I'm like, no, that's not good. And I dumped it and I was like, damn it. But again, I had enough good shows for the season that I'm like, I don't need to worry about it. But that'll do for this run of the anime discussion. So I'll get back to it in the beginning of March. But for now, let's talk through what's going on with the rest of it. Next week's episode is gonna change probably because I think Lee and I are gonna do an Apothecary Diaries episode. We're gonna try and record a review of season 2, But a lot of like Lee's initial thoughts of season 1, we're basically using it as an excuse to talk about Mao Mao and Jinchi. Let's be totally honest. It's about Mao Mao because we love Mao Mao. So it's like duh. So we'll talk about Apothecary Diaries. I don't know if it's going to take 30 minutes or an hour or 2 or 5. It really just depends on how much stuff we want to talk about because it's great. But I was going to do Makia When the Promised Flower Blooms, but if we do Apothecary Diaries first, then we'll do that, and I'll just move Makia into March. Final Fantasy VI, the next video game review, and that I can do in my sleep, so I don't need to worry about that too much. East Origin, I just finished, so I've got a lot to talk about, and that'll go into April. Be the Beginning, I rewatched about a month ago, and I liked it mostly. It has some issues, namely the second season, but it's fine. And then Mega Man 5 and Mega Man X5 for 2 of the episodes for Mega May. So keeping up with Mega Man stuff. And obviously in between that, I'll be talking about all the anime that I've been watching, especially for this season. But that'll do it for today, and I will see you next time. Citizen Strife, signing off.